welcome back to Secret Weapons, and we are finally doing Q&A episode 3. But before we get into it, I want to thank today's sponsor, DistroKid. I am thrilled to have DistroKid sponsoring this video and sponsoring something on this channel because I've been using DistroKid myself since 2015. For the last 7 years, I've been using DistroKid for every release, solo or band project I've been a part of. And I chose DistroKid back then and still use them today for a few key reasons. Their website is incredibly easy to use. Submitting music, submitting artwork is a breeze. Seeing your stats and getting paid is just as easy, and the pricing structure on it is so simple. Publish as much music as you want for a flat yearly fee, and it's a ridiculously low cost anyways. It's great. And for those of you watching this video right now, it gets a little bit cheaper. If you use the link in my description down below, you can get an additional 7% off your first year with DistroKid. So I highly recommend you check them out. If you need to distribute music, DistroKid, in my opinion, is the gold standard for getting your music out there in front of an audience. Thank you so much to DistroKid for sponsoring this video. Let's get into the questions. So last week, I put out the ask for questions for this episode 3 of Q&A on Instagram, here on YouTube, and on my Discord. I'm gonna get through as many questions as I can afford to get through in this video without making this impossibly long and just like a grueling experience to watch back. I'm gonna get through all of my questions from the Discord because those are my Patreon supporters. If you wanna become a Patreon supporter and join that really cool Discord gear community, there's a link down below. Or if you want to catch the next time I do one of these Q&As and just see general behind the scenes and everything from this channel, you can follow me on Instagram, link right there and also down below. Or you can just stay here on YouTube and get just the good stuff, I guess. So let's start off with our Discord questions. The first one comes from Jay Horn, who asks, what is your take on stacking dirt, boost, and EQ pedals in a dry chain? How do you like to start your order, gain amount, settings, and taking into account how they interact with one another to achieve your optimal tone? So this is a very fitting question because I just recently covered the Electronic Audio Experiments Model FET here on this channel, wherein one of the big things we focused on was the stackability of this as a last in your drive chain overdrive preamp pedal. It's modeled after a Sun Model T, and on its own, it's a good drive, but the real kind of magic in this pedal to me is the ability to stack drives into it. And that was really valuable because I had kind of fallen out of love with stacking drives in general recently. I've been kind of taking an approach of individual components with maybe a boost up top. So my general drive chain will be kind of different voicings of medium gain drives, a high gain drive, and then maybe a boost pedal up front for the ability to kind of get more out of any of those previous stages. The Model FET really did kind of solve for a lot of that for me and kind of reintroduced me to kind of enjoying stacking drives. And to that end, I've actually been really digging the Browne Amplification Carbon as a stackable drive component as well. I find that it's round and gentle and soft and high headroom in a really beautiful way. And that works really well because I've also been playing a lot of this new guitar here in the studio, my Bunting Melody Queen T, which has a Tele bridge pickup and a gold foil neck pickup that are a lot softer and lower output than what you see a lot on this channel these days, especially for me being kind of an ambient guy. I tend to lean towards pretty hot pickups a lot of the time. I'm in love with the tonality of this guitar, but something that did throw me through a loop was the realization that I was getting way less out of my drive chain than I normally would with my Jennings or my Harmony or my Josh Williams, which is incredibly high output. And so this has also really helped me to kind of get back into that stacking process. My general rules of thumb are put the thing that you want to be the purest up front. So like a DRV will typically go first for me, or a boost pedal ahead of that if you're doing something like this. And then put your kind of softest, roundest overdrives towards the end, things that feel more transparent or feel more amp-like. Things that are really responsive, I find, do well at the end. Things like that Model FET or the Carbon. So let's dig in really quick. So right now we have our dry guitar tone, and by that I mean just none of our dirt pedals. We've got a little bit of El Cap, a little bit of, we'll turn the Big Sky off, and we've got a little bit of Flint at the end. So this guitar is not super high output. So like level and gain at noon on the Carbon's only gonna get you about here. Which feels great, but if you go to it almost feels clean again. Which I do love. I do love that for the kind of versatility of it all. Which I do love for the versatility of it all. But, so I find that like, what I'll actually do is bring the gain even further down on the Carbon. And then something like the Germanium boost from Benson. It's something that like, each of those independently, the Benson, and the Carbon, and nothing. But the two of those actually stack and they bring different things to the table. The Benson brings a little bit of color and a touch of compression, a little bit of kind of non-distortion saturation. And then the Carbon brings some kind of preampy tonality and a little bit more articulation. But when you put the two of those together, you can push it a lot harder. And then you can always put something in the middle there, like the, right now we have the op-amp DRV in the center of the two of those. And so like that by itself. And that actually boosts really well with the Carbon after it. And what I like is I can take all three of those and keep a pretty clean tone there, which is really great. Hold on. There we go. That's the spot in my studio with the least EMF. What I think is really important is understanding what you want out of each stage. Sometimes I want something with a little bit of compression and focus like that Benson boost, especially for something like this that can use a little bit of oomph in the kind of like initial gain staging. For a higher output guitar, something like my Josh Williams Stella, I would rather go with maybe the Limelight's built-in boost or the Milkman boost, because there's a little bit of low shelving that happens to keep things from getting muddy as you hit those drives downstream. Those are kind of my big things. Understand the kind of boost you want for the first in chain, and whatever your last in chain is, whether it's the Model Thet, the Carbon, the Browne, or the Benson preamp, understand what you want that tonality to be, but generally pick something that kind of feels like you'd be hitting an amplifier. Almost treat that last gain stage like it's your amp. And I think that's been my kind of guiding principle for kind of how I stack overdrives when I choose to do so. Oh, and to that end, Jim has an addendum to that question, which is live versus studio setup, and two, amp cab versus tube amp. Basically, how would I change my approach based on those kind of variances? And I would say that I'm less likely to stack drives and rather just pick the flavors I want when I'm in the studio, because I have access to everything and I can swap things out on a track by track basis, and I can set my gain staging in the pedal itself. Live, I'm making more concessions because I need to get a myriad of sounds for a set list, but I'm only putting 2 to 4 drives on my board, so you're going to have to kind of go, well, these 2 stack to get me the amount of gain I need, even if it's not the exact voicing I would want. So I generally pick safer drives live, weirder drives in the studio, because I want the character in the recording, but I just need the volume and the presence and the section of the mix I'm responsible for filled in a live context. So I'm way more likely to put something like the Browne Protein on a live board because there's a compressed higher gain thing and a wider open lower gain thing in the same unit, and it's really easy. Yeah, I'm more likely to pick more versatile drives live and more specific drives in the studio. And the second part of that is I will be a lot more careful about the level amounts in my direct-in rig than with amplifiers. I find that a lot of drive pedals actually benefit really, really well from pushing a lot of extra volume as well as the kind of clipping amount. If anything, I like lower amounts of gain, higher amounts of volume in a drive pedal when I'm running a tube amp versus the direct rig, especially these stereo UA pedals direct rig. The way a stereo set of amps in a direct environment like this break up with wet effects ahead of them can be a little strange if you're not careful. And so if I'm running a direct rig, I will keep my levels low. I will try to keep my overall volume pretty consistent across my gain staging and use more of the in-pedal clipping for a direct rig versus an amp rig where I just want that volume. And again, let's give a quick example of that. So I have my kind of bass tone here. And I'll give this because this is a quieter guitar, and I tuned my Dream and Ruby for like my Josh Williams and some other higher output guitars. I'll bring it up to kind of roughly where those guitars output to with the Benson boost. Almost edge of breakup with those amps. Something like the Carbon, I will then make sure that I go like, bring that level down a little bit. So now I'm getting more overall gain. But I'm not overdriving the amps themselves really aggressively. Whereas, and this affords me the ability to kind of bring that level down, and I could really crank that gain if I wanted a lot of drive. Versus, and this is crucial, I could bring that gain down, crank that level, and listen to what happens to our wet effects. It's pretty important to be careful with how you hit digital amps with breakup and wet effects, especially in stereo. There's something very jarring about your guitar sounding like it's in mono, but having your distortion happening way out in the fringes like that, especially when it's like wet effect distortion. Your guitar feels like it's centered in your mix, but you're getting a lot of thin, wispy breakup on the edges. And in situations like that, you either want to just go mono with wet effects in post, or mono entirely, because you can get those really shoegazy things. They sound a lot better in mono, in my opinion. And to that end, our next question is from The Lifted Index, and he wants to know if I always record my guitars in stereo and any mixing tips for when I stack stereo guitar parts so they don't get overly dense or muddy. And yeah, the answer is, for that last part, overly dense and muddy, get your guitar EQ, your amp output and everything dialed early on. Too much low end, too much mid-range frequencies, too much high end. Like if you're playing by yourself and your guitar just sounds larger than life, it's really fun. But when you try to put that into a mix, it's going to eat everything up. And the moment you try to start stacking that with other guitar parts or bass or keys or drums, it's not fun anymore. It's not worth how much fun it was to spaceship out like 15 minutes earlier. So when I'm recording guitars, I generally try to run less reverb, kind of a little bit of a low cut, really careful with what mid-range frequencies I'm pushing, and really careful with how much kind of like high-end treble hiss and sizzle and everything that I am bringing to the table. And so the other part of that question is, yes, I almost always record my guitars in stereo, mostly because I'm a big fan and pretty like unwilling to compromise on stereo reverb. But I do find that mono delays can be a really important piece of the puzzle for mixing good sounding stereo guitars in a mix, and then panning those left-right channels not all the way on top of each other, but finding places where that left and right can sit on the same side of the mix without being directly on top of each other. That way, those individual guitars still keep their width, but they don't collapse in on themselves. We'll drop a couple examples of what two guitars, panned, hard left and hard right, can sound like if you leave them stacked, hard panned, and then panned the way that I would pan them generally. Nicola asking if I can share my favorite UA effects clean settings. And I wish I could. I'll drop a little screenshot right here of what cabinets I'm using. But generally, I just find that keeping that volume low and that master high is my trick. These UA pedals sound amazing, but they break up really quickly. And I'm still, as of time of recording this, running them at the end of my chain. And so I need to keep that amp gain super low and the output super high so that I'm still getting a rich, non-anemic signal hitting my interface. Jumping over to Instagram, Paul Crichton asks, if I could only keep 3 guitars, which would they be and why? And this is where we get into really difficult questions because we start getting into the Venn diagram of my 2 categories of guitars. I have guitars that are intensely useful, usable. I rely heavily on them for quote unquote my sound. And then I have guitars that have nothing but deep sentimental value and some space in the middle that overlaps between the 2. So on one hand, you have things like my Bunting Melody Queen, which is brand new to the studio and is just an absolute marvel, one of the most joyful playing experiences of my life. And I could not fathom not having this, having only had it for a short period of time. Conversely, this is a 93 Rickenbacker 36012 that has never been strung up as a 12 string for as long as I have owned it. It is a really cool guitar that gets criminally little play from me, but it was sold to me by a dear, dear friend and early in my life mentor, and I will die with this guitar because it means that much to me. And then you have some stuff in the middle. Like this is an Eric Johnson Strat that was given to me by, again, a dear friend, a mentor, somebody that I love dearly. And again, this guitar will never leave my possession ever for the rest of my life. And I also play it a ton. You see it on videos here on this channel. I use it in live scenarios. I also play this guitar a ton. And so this is where we get into the complicated world of sentimentality, gear hoardership, and also pure usability. So we have to just strip away the sentimentality and just say, if I was only gonna be able to keep 3 guitars for pure usability purposes, what would I keep? And so to me, I think that you just have to cover the most ground with the best guitars you can get your hands on if you're going to do that. And for me, those 3 guitars are the Bunting Melody Queen, of course. You have the Telly bridge pickup. You have the amazing, amazing descendant vibrato system. And this gold foil pickup in the neck is the greatest thing ever devised by mankind. My Josh Williams Stella. This is the most rock and roll thing I have. This bridge pickup, this Lawler low wind Imperial, and a semi-hollow body like this is just ferocious. I've changed no settings from what I had dialed up for the Bunting, and let's listen to what a difference this is. It goes full rock so fast. And you've got that Duesenberg less trem vibrato on it, which is awesome. And this Porter P90 in the neck is absolutely like the warmest, gentlest. And thirdly would be my Jennings Voyager. This is kind of the like flagship boutique guitar of mine. Chad was kind enough to get this out to me back in like 2018, and it's been the most rock solid thing. It's been such a reliable guitar. Everything sounds good on it. The bridge pickup is great with drive. That middle position cleans up beautifully. And so does that neck. And it just gets so rock and roll if you need it to. I love this guitar. I love this guitar. It's such a great guitar. However, having said all of that, Acid Math did ask, sell all but one guitar. Which am I keeping? I think the answer in actuality here would be this Lincoln Brewster signature Strat. When I think about the like, get rid of all your guitars but one kind of thing, I don't think desert island, what guitar would I play if I could just play whatever I wanted for the rest of my life? I try to think, what's the most practical solution? I need to keep working. I need to keep doing gigs. I need to keep writing music and branching out into genres and everything. And I don't know that I've ever played a more versatile guitar than this. And it's interesting because it's not like I love this guitar. It's not my favorite guitar out of my entire collection, all things considered, but it averages out to maybe the best guitar I own, like in terms of the overall feature set and versatility and everything. Let's pull up some sounds. We've got that carbon on, and we're on the bridge position here. Up to that neck. We have a floating tremolo on here. Those middle positions, the 2 and the 4. I'm also of the opinion that the middle position on a Strat is wholly underappreciated. And again, without changing anything on our pedal board, this Lincoln Strat has a boost circuit. This thing does so much stuff so well. This is actually a great transition. Justin JHK says, I'm new and my SSS Strat sounds brittle. Any tips? Yeah, my advice here is be very mindful, especially on this bridge position, be very mindful about your pick attack and pick overdrives that will kind of bolster and support that guitar. So none of my drives are on right now. If I played down here by the bridge, it gets really like thin and throaty and not super like robust. But I play up a little bit closer here. I change my pick attack. Instead of hitting straight on, I start hitting the side of the pick, like from flat to a little bit of an angle. And then I kind of come up here a bit. Again, still in that bridge position here. And then something like, let's take the DRV down super low. You take something like a rat and you play super close to the bridge on a strat. That's not going to work. But if you take that and kind of soften your playing dynamics like I talked about, and this is with gain at 0, by the way. You can kind of really pull some roundness and some low end out of it. But it's also important to know, what are you playing to? Like maybe grab something like a blues breaker. The way you angle your pick and where you play in relation from here to about here is going to make a major difference on the overall tonality of your playing. Your pick attack is a massive part of your playing. And so my advice is spend some time just working on getting from a place of going like and not liking what you're hearing to or put a humbucker in it. Ryan O'Brien Mendoza wants to know, what's the best cocktail for a Wednesday night? And the answer, as always, is a Boulevardier. See Ya Later wants me to review the Browne Carbon and asks how I feel about the RV500 and the DD500. I feel vaguely positive about the RV and DD500 series. I'm a bigger fan of the 200 series from Boss. I think that in general, Boss's effect quality is amazing, but I don't like the implementation of menu diving in their screen-based pedals. But I do really, really like the sounds. If you like the workflow of a Boss pedal, you're in luck because it sounds great. But for me, I prefer the 200 series because I like how compact it is relative to the amount of features that you have immediately available at your fingertips. I think that the Browne Amplification Carbon is great. I've been a big fan of the Protein for years. It's been one of my go-to live dual drives. And to that end, I think that the Carbon does a great job of going from really I think it does a great job of being softer than a lot of blues breakers. There's no stiffness to the response in this thing, which I really like. And this is with gain all the way down right now, which is just some great kind of like low end focused preampiness. I also think it's got a lot of really good gain on tap. I generally like it as kind of like a low mid-gain setting, like we talked about, that I can then like hit with something else. Ironically, I really wish that Browne would make a King of Tones style carbon into carbon pedal. I should hit them up and see if they're willing to make one of those for me. That'd be really cool. I get that it's just a King of Tone, but, and I know this is controversial, I like their take on the Blues Breaker more than I like the King of Tone or almost any other close lineage of the Blues Breaker. I think that the Carbon and the Limelight stand alone for me as Blues Breaker takes that I really love. Andy Watt wants to know, why does Benedictine make every whiskey cocktail better? And my answer here is twofold. One, it doesn't make every whiskey cocktail better. It makes every cocktail better. For example, I highly recommend that you go drink a Poet's Dream, which is basically a gin martini with Benedictine, and it's fantastic. And to answer your actual question, it's because Benedictine is a really well-balanced liqueur for being a very herbal thing. It's got that kind of like herbaceous quality to it, but because it has a very honey-forward flavor profile, it adds sweetness and richness without tasting sugary. And seriously though, I think that's why this slots in so well, especially in drinks with like sweet vermouth, or like you said, like a lot of whiskey drinks. This brings a softness and kind of a savoriness to a drink that's really, really balanced. And I think it's great. For those of you at home, your homework is to make a Preakness and a Poet's Dream. Let's do that, yeah. Oh, by the way, for those of you here who are only YouTube subscribers and are trying to figure out why I'm answering cocktail questions, it's because on my Instagram and over on my Discord, we talk a lot about home bars and craft cocktails and making and developing your own twists on cocktails at home. The Ben M. Neal, I'm gonna call him the Ben M. Neal, wants me to rank my favorite guitar bridge and trem systems. Number one, the forever love of my life, is the Jazzmaster style floating trem system. The play, it's subtle. You don't have to dive bomb with it. You can get a lot of very gentle motion out of not a lot of space. But it also gives you a lot of room if you want it. And I find that it holds tuning stability really, really well. My second favorite is going to be, of course, my beloved Les Trem 2 system by Duesenberg that I have here on the Josh Williams. I consider this to essentially be a much better take on the Bigsby. It's a similar kind of feel, but with a lot more motion, a lot better tuning stability, and it's not a nightmare to change the strings, which is one of the things I hate the most about a Bigsby. Similar to the Jazzmaster style trem, you get a lot of very like small range of motion subtleties, but your dive bombs will get more aggressive more quickly. Like I don't feel like I'm putting a lot of pressure on that spring in order to get that like quarter step, half step drop. Whereas I felt like I was pushing more dramatically down on the first guitar. Third up, and this might be a surprise, is the Strat trem system, but only if you have it ever so slightly floating. You have that subtlety, but it takes some doing. You kind of have to be very gentle. You have to take a very light touch with this, which you don't have to do with a good descendant or mastery trem system. But you also get the most dive bombing of anything I've got. It's a fun one. It's really good. And it's got some decent tuning stability too, especially if your guitar's like dialed, which this one tends to be. It does somewhat pain me to say that the Bigsby trem ranks higher to me than like the Mustang does, but I find that, at least with my Mustang, I've yet to be able to get it to a place where that bridge system feels like it's got a lot of tuning stability, even though I like the feel of it more. So A well set up Bigsby wins by merit of not falling straight out of tune, I guess. The interesting thing about the Bigsby to me is it feels like the opposite of that Strat. That Strat gives you very carefully applied subtlety or very wildly applied, like big 80s Floyd Rosy dive bombs. I feel like with the Bigsby, you can slam this thing and it stays pretty subtle. For me, the biggest drawback on these, because that's not a bad sound, the biggest drawback on these is restringing them sucks so much that it's unforgivable. And tragically, lastly, the Mustang trem system, which feel-wise I like more than the Bigsby and probably more than the Strat as well, but I just find that it lacks some stability. That's probably just a byproduct of the way that mine is set up. It's been true for a couple different Mustang and Jag Stings I've owned over the years. So if anybody in Northern California knows a great Mustang-specific tech, please put me in touch with them because I really want this guitar to be like rock solid. This is my 72 all-original Mustang, by the way. Tom Jepson wants to know, favorite vermouth for a Negroni. I kind of cut my teeth and built my home bar around Antica Carpano sweet vermouth. It's very robust and flavorful, and it's really good. It's probably one of the best sweet vermouths you can buy, but it will also bully other ingredients. For something like a Negroni, that can be really welcomed because the sweetness and the cherry notes in it do a good job of kind of pushing down some of the things that people don't like about Campari in a Negroni. But as somebody who really loves Campari and has kind of made sweet vermouths a cornerstone of a lot of their drinks, Kochi or Kochi or whatever, however you pronounce this, Vermouth di Torino. This is my favorite sweet vermouth on the market right now. I basically never have a bottle of this in my house anymore because I'm using it almost every day that I'm making cocktails. It's balanced, it's easy, it's reliable, it doesn't bully your other ingredients too badly. It's really great. S. Yank wants to know what's the best way to get the Ruby and Dream in phase without a DAW. And for me, it is the Pinstripe pedals, DISO Plus, but with a caveat, and it's not this one specifically. This is the DISO Plus standard. I also have one somewhere over there that has an XLR sum mod on it, but back there on my amp board right now with my Dream and my Ruby, I do have a DISO Plus that has a polarity flip on the output, and that has been a lifesaver in the last couple of weeks that it's been here. So that's what I'm using now, is I'm using a Pinstripe Pedals DISO Plus with a polarity flip mod on it. For those of you confused by this question, it's worth noting that when you're using stereo amps, you will often run into phase issues or polarity issues between the two amplifiers you're using. This is caused by a myriad of different things, including like mic and cabinet distances and things, but in the direct world, it's just a hardware thing. And an example of this is two of the UA pedals are out of polarity with one another, and so you have to correct that or else it sounds weird. A quick demonstration of what we're talking about here. Here is how my rig is supposed to sound. So if I go back here and flip the switch on my DISO Plus so that they are not in polarity with one another, you're now going to hear this instead. It's weird. You're hearing some weird comb filtering frequencies that are cut out really sharply, and you're noticing the El Cap's stereo image is getting pretty mangled. And then we flip that polarity back. And all's right in the world, which is great because then you don't have to rely on your front of house engineer to remember to flip your phase. Sammy G64 wants to know, how long did it take me to become a Descent electric guitar? I'm gonna go ahead and assume that we mean decent electric guitar player here. And the answer is, I don't think that I am. I think that's probably true for a lot of guitar players, that you kind of always have this kind of unshakable imposter syndrome. And once you learn something new and cool about your instrument, you can see the next plateau that you want to reach. And for me, that's kind of where I feel like I sit. I will say that the areas in which I really do feel happy about my playing have very little to do with guitar culture as a general thing, have very little to do with what my contemporaries on YouTube or in the local Sacramento music scene or whatever else are doing, and much more so about kind of, I have just tunnel visioned in on the ways in which I like to play guitar, the sounds that I like, and the style and idiosyncrasies of my style of playing, and just kind of feeling like I have hit a point where I know what sounds like me, and I feel like I have an identity as a guitar player. And that means more to me than being able to play fast or do cover songs really effectively or tone match to a classic record. For me, it's about understanding my own identity as a guitar player and being happy with the product that I create, the music that I write as a result of that, and just having the necessary tools to get the things in my head into my recorder. Sieg SK8 wants to know my favorite bar book and my favorite drink. Favorite drink varies from day to day. I really like Campari, I really like sweet vermouth, and I really like Benedictine. So a lot of my favorite drinks will be things like the Vucare, the Negroni, the Boulevardier, those kinds of drinks. Spirit forward, well balanced, served on a rock with like an orange peel or a lemon twist, that kind of thing. And regarding my favorite bar book, I have to go with the Cocktail Codex. This was the first cocktail book that I got. My wife got this for me, and I just found it to be so incredibly usable to understand kind of not just recipes, but the whys and the hows and the lineage behind recipes, which I think is important when you start trying to branch out and figure out what you like and find some variety in the drinks you're making at home. This thing's great because it basically distills down the history of kind of all the different variations of cocktails into lineage, essentially, of 6 classic cocktails that kind of bear out to the rest of the modern cocktail culture, tiki culture notwithstanding. Cocktail Codex. It's a great book. I really recommend it. Really, really helpful. Eric Reader Photo wants to know, what do I use for my drums in recordings? And I am using Get Good Drums, Modern and Massive, on almost everything right now. The workflow is so easy. The drum sounds are phenomenal. I love what Get Good Drums is doing right now for the non-drummers of us who want to build out great sounding productions. And finally, Drew Rose wants to know, in regards to music, at what point did I realize I can make a career out of this? I mean, the long answer is it's a work in progress always. I still don't know that I'm making a career out of this right now. This is something that takes up a lot of my day-to-day and week-to-week and month-to-month life right now. And the channel and everything else has managed to provide some income, which has been really helpful because it allows me to invest more heavily into this channel. Things like today's sponsorship, the DistroKid sponsorship for this video, just being completely upfront with everybody. I don't know that I would have been able to make this video today if DistroKid had not emailed me about partnering with me on a video, not even this video specifically. They just went, we like what you're doing, we think that it's really cool, and we would love to sponsor a video. And I went, great, I've been wanting to do a Q&A again, but the sponsored work on this channel, the pedal demos and all that stuff, it's a really small piece of helping kind of justify being able to spend the amount of time that I spend on music here in the studio for this channel, for Instagram, for everything else. And it's a constant uphill battle. It's constantly growing. It's constantly trying to smooth out your workflow so you're spending as little time as possible in front of the camera, in the editing, and as much time as possible, like, you know, being able to hang out with my kid and my wife and write music just for the fun of it and all these other things. It's a constant challenge. I'm incredibly lucky to have been able to create a semi-monetizable version of this for myself so that I can invest heavily in this because I really love doing it. And so things like DistroKid coming along have been really great, kind of like reinforcements that what I'm doing might actually be sustainable for some amount of time. But the truth is, I don't know that it is. I don't know that this is a career yet. I still have real jobs in the real world that don't involve this camera, this pedal board, this room in general. But I just know that when I was younger and had no kid and a lot more free time, I just invested all my time in doing this. And it took a long time for it to show kind of any real ROI. And now that it has, I'm just trying to lean in, say yes to things, keep finding great opportunities to make good content, to get better at the production side of things, to get better at my playing, to get better at how I present ideas on this channel, and mostly to write better songs. I just want the songs at the starts of these videos to always be better and to be something that I would sit down and listen to on my own. As long as I'm doing that stuff, I think that I might still have a future doing this. And I guess the short answer is I still don't know. So go to Patreon, search for me, link down below, support the channel. It helps me keep doing this. Thank you so much. Thank you for sticking it out to the end here. Another massive thank you to DistroKid for sponsoring this video. I am stoked to have them partnering on this because I've been using them for so long. And remember, you can get 7% off your first year of DistroKid using the link in the description down below. So with that said, thank you so much for watching, and until next time.